A Medal of Honor winner accuses Muhammad Ali of being a coward in front of 30 million spectators while the cameras roll live. What transpires during those intense 12 minutes will go down in television history as the most-watched event of all time and alter the course of both men's lives irrevocably. If you want to know who will assist you out in times of need, sometimes it matters more than any win you may have had. Johnny Carson's Tight Show is getting ready for what would become the most contentious part in the program's history as the red light on the antenna flashes ominously in NBC's Studio 6B at Rockefeller Center. A nervous Johnny Carson adjusts his tie anxiously as he sits behind his famous desk on March 15, 1973, ready to welcome two guests who are unaware they are about to cause televised mayhem and magic. A 42-year-old career military officer whose chest is burdened with the weight of America's highest military awards, Colonel James Patterson, is our first honored guest. A famous award among his honors is the Medal of Honor, which he received after a terrible fight at Da Nang. While holding off a Viet Minh onslaught alone for 6 hours, rescuing his whole squad and suffering 3 bullet wounds, Patterson won this honor. The Medal of Honor is flanked by 2 purple arts, which represent wounds sustained in earlier battles. A bronze star with a V symbol signifies the extra act of valor while under fire. Motivated by an innate feeling of duty, Patterson joined the military immediately after graduating from high school in rural Kansas. His grandpa fought in World War I and his father in World War II. He is, without a doubt, an authentic American hero. He was a guest on the program to promote his book, Future Leadership Under Fire: The Sound of the Battlefield, which has already become a bestseller among military families and corporate leaders, aiming to understand how ordinary people become exceptional under duress. The second guest is Muhammad Ali, the world heavyweight champion, who has consented to come on the program to discuss his impending bout against Ken Norton, planned for later this month. Ali's participation on mainstream television is still somewhat controversial in 1973, only 2 years after the Supreme Court overturned his conviction for rejecting military service. But his boxing attraction is evident, and Carson's producers know his participation will ensure enormous numbers. The champion spent the afternoon in a Harlem mosque before flying to New York, engaged in prayer and meditation that left him exceptionally thoughtful and tranquil. He sits in the boxing suite, chatting with his advisors and signing autographs for NBC staffers. Dazzling, his wit and celebrity appeal are on full show as he entertains a tiny audience that has assembled to get a peek of the world's most renowned athlete. Ali wears a nice dark blue suit with a silver tie, his hair properly combed, and his confidence shines through every action and grin. He has no idea that the next hour will test his character in a way no boxing ring ever could, that he is about to face an opponent far more dangerous than any heavyweight contender, a decorated war hero armed with moral authority and the sympathy of a nation still deeply divided over the Vietnam War. Carson starts the program with his typical monologue, but there's a stream of tension in his voice as he prepares to bring in his first guest. "Ladies and gentlemen," Carson declares to the studio crowd and the 30 million fans watching at home, "please welcome a true American hero, Medal of Honor air vessel, Colonel James Patterson." The crowd erupts in cheers. Tony truant as Patterson goes onto the scene. His military attitude was visible in every stride, his clothing pristine, and his decorations catching the studio lights. Carson had a courteous conversation with Patterson, addressing his military experience and his book. Patterson talked eloquently on duty, honor, and the sacrifices made by American military in Vietnam. His replies were clear and bold, given with the authority of a man who had earned the right to speak of bravery by blood and sacrifice. The crowd hung on every word, evidently impressed by his tales of valor under fire. "Colonel Patterson," said to Carson as they neared the end of the interview segment, "you have dedicated your life to serving this country with honor. What are your thoughts on those who chose a different path during the war?" It was supposed to be a general question about military service versus civilian life, but Patterson's answer is about to unleash a firestorm that neither Harnan nor his producers anticipated. Patterson's jaw tightens slightly, and his eyes darken as he leans forward in his chair. "Johnny, I believe that when your country calls, you answer. Real men don't hide behind lawyers and religious exemptions. Real men don't let others fight and die in their place while they make millions entertaining people at home." The colonel's voice carries the weight of absolute conviction, and although no names are mentioned, everyone in America knows exactly who he's talking about. Carson moves uneasily in his seat, realizing that his meticulously prepared program is going to blow out of hand. "Well, Colonel, I know we have strong feelings about this." But before Carson can complete his diplomatic deflection, Patterson begins his onslaught with lethal accuracy. "There are men who talk about being the greatest when true greatness was demonstrated in the jungles of Southeast Asia," Patterson remarked, his voice increasing with each syllable. "There are people who claim to be champions when true champions fought and died for the freedom that allowed them to become rich and famous. That's not courage, Johnny. That's cowardice disguised as a fancy word." The studio audience fell into stunned silence, and Carson's face went pale as he realized his show had just become a political lightning rod. In living rooms across America, 30 million viewers watched, mesmerized, as this decorated war hero delivered what amounted to a character assassination of Muhammad Ali on national television. "And speaking of buying it," Carson said, his voice strained as he tried to regain control of his show, "we'll be right back after this commercial break with heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali." The timing couldn't have been worse or more dramatic. As the cameras cut for the commercial break, Patterson remained seated on the couch, his comments hanging in the air like smoke from a battlefield. Backstage, panic erupted as the producers frantically tried to decide how to handle the explosive situation they had inadvertently created. Ali's helpers quickly approached him in the dressing area, their faces blanched with fear as they conveyed what had just occurred on live television. "We can leave now," his lawyer said, frantically, pacing the tiny room. "You don't have to submit to this kind of ambush. This wasn't what was agreed upon when we booked this appearance." His trainer, Angelo Dundee, nodded in agreement, adding in a chant, "This man just called you an ageist in front of the whole country. No one would blame you for walking out of this trap." Even Carson's own producers suggested they might end the show early, feigning technical difficulties or a medical emergency. Anything to avoid the possible calamity of bringing these two guys together on live television. But Ali, who faced hostile audiences and death threats throughout his career, who was branded everything from a traitor to a terrorist by millions of Americans, made a choice that would define his reputation much more than any bout in the ring. "No," Ali answered, gently, his voice conveying a calm firmness that astonished everyone around him. "I'm going out there. That guy needs to hear my side of the story, and America deserves to see how we handle disagreement in our country." As the commercial break ended and the cameras prepared to roll again, Ali walked onto the stage with the same confidence he brought to every boxing ring, but this time his opponent was equipped with moral authority and popular sympathy. Carson's introduction was uncomfortable and quick. "Ladies and gentlemen, Muhammad Ali." The clapping was significantly more muted than normal, with many in the crowd visibly uncomfortable praising a guy who had just been dubbed a coward by a true war hero. Ali took his seat next to Patterson, and the tension in the room was so heavy it looked crushed against the television cameras. Muhammad began carefully, "Carson, I presume you heard Colonel Patterson's remarks during the commercial break." He slowly lowered his head, his eyes never leaving Patterson's face. The colonel sat extremely hard in his chair, his jaw tightened, and his stare immovable, apparently preparing for a conflict. Instead of a furious defense or a game of "in the brilliant words" everyone was expecting, Ali said something that startled the 30 million spectators watching at home and utterly disarmed Colonel Patterson. He stood from his chair, moved a few steps to where Patterson was seated, and extended his hand. Colonel Patterson said softly, his voice devoid of the swagger he had become famous for, I want to thank you for your service to our country, and I want to thank you for speaking your mind. You have earned the right to speak your mind through your sacrifice and courage, and I respect that, even though it hurts to hear." Patterson, clearly taken aback by this gracious response to his public attack, received Ali's hand. The gesture was filmed by cameras and transmitted to millions of homes, generating one of the most stunning pictures in television history. A moment of respect between two men who personified radically different notions of American fortitude. Ali returns to his seat, but instead of the defensive position everyone anticipated, he leans forward and talks directly to Patterson. It's as if the cameras and the 30 million television viewers have suddenly disappeared, leaving simply two guys having an honest conversation. "Colonel, you said that real men answer when your country calls, and you're absolutely right. How so?" His voice calm and serious. "But may I tell you about the country that called me? The country that called Muhammad Ali was one where I couldn't have lunch next to a white child, couldn't sleep in the same hotel as white people, couldn't even drink from the same fountain. The America that wanted me to fight for freedom abroad was the same America that denied me freedom at home." Patterson's expression begins to shift as the rigid certainty in his eyes gives way to something else: confusion, contemplation, possibly even comprehension. "You fought for freedom in Vietnam, Colonel," and I answered Ali, his voice rising louder but never losing its polite tone. "But I was fighting for freedom here, even in America. When I refused to go to Vietnam, I wasn't running away from a fight. I was choosing which fight to fight. I was saying I couldn't kill poor people in a foreign country when my own people were being killed by poverty and racism right here at home." The studio audience, which had been silent with tension, began to murmur as Ali's words sank in. Here was a position many of them had never considered: that Ali's reluctance to serve wasn't cowardice, but a new type of heroism, the guts to stand alone against the whole nation for what he felt was right. Ali gets up again and starts to walk slowly in front of the sofa, his hands moving as he talks with a passion that reminds everyone watching why he's not only a brilliant athlete, but a terrific orator. "Colonel Patterson, you and I are more alike than different. We've both looked at injustice and decided we couldn't stand idly by. You fought injustice with a rifle in the jungles of Vietnam. I've fought injustice with my voice and my career here in America. You risked your life for your beliefs. I risked my freedom, my career, my prime earning years for mine." Patterson, who came to the show prepared to lecture a man he considered a coward, finds himself listening to a perspective he'd never considered. The conviction in Ali's voice, the sincerity of his explanation, and the respect he exhibited while being publicly humiliated led the colonel to reassess notions he had held for years. But the colonel continued, his voice softening as he sat back down. "I want you to know something. Every day since I made this decision, I've thought about men like you. I've thought about the soldiers who went in my place, who faced dangers I never had to face, and I've wondered if there was another way, if I could have served my country and my conscience at the same time." The camera zoomed in on Patterson's face, capturing the moment decades of certainty began to crack. Tears welled in the corners of his eyes as he grappled with feelings he hadn't expected to experience. The guy he had come to judge as a coward showed a depth of character and moral complexity he hadn't dreamed conceivable. "You know what haunts me, Colonel?" his voice said, barely above a whisper, but nonetheless reaching every corner of the hushed studio. It wasn't criticism or hostility, or even losing me. The title. It's asking me whether my decision made things tougher for guys like you. It's asking me whether standing out for what I believed in anyway dishonored the sacrifice of warriors who believed in something else. The hush that follows is absolute. 30 million Americans watch as two men who symbolized opposing sides of their generation's most controversial issue find common ground in mutual respect and shared grief. Carson, a veteran of thousands of television interviews, is left speechless by such raw honesty and unexpected grace. Finally, Colonel Patterson speaks, his voice heavy with passion. "Muhammad, for the first time, I came here tonight believing you were a coward. I came believing there was only one way to serve your country, only one definition of courage." He stops, wiping his tears with the back of his palm. "But listening to you, seeing the respect you showed me, even after I attacked you on national television, I realized I was wrong about you. Not wrong about the importance of military service, but wrong about you." As the colonel rises, his obvious military bearing, yet somehow softened by the emotion of the moment. "You are not a coward, Muhammad. You are a different kind of fighting soldier, a different kind of war. I may not agree with all your choices, but I can respect the courage it took to make them, and I can respect the man who made them." What happens next produces one of the most emotional moments in television history. Colonel Patterson, the renowned military hero who had come to humiliate Muhammad Ali, offers his hand, not in welcome, but in repentance. Ali hears about this, and the two men hug live on television. Their reunion was seen by millions of Americans who had been brainwashed to consider them as foes. "I'm sorry, Muhammad." The statements held the weight of real regret. "I'm sorry I attacked you without trying to understand your perspective. I'm sorry I evaluated your bravery by my definition instead of attempting to understand yours." Ali's response would be quoted in newspapers across the country the next day. "Colonel, you have nothing to apologize for. You talked from your heart about what you believe in, and that takes guts too. We may have picked different fights, but we both decided to fight for something larger than ourselves. That makes us brothers, not enemies." Johnny Carson, finally finding his voice, addressed the cameras with tears in his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you have just witnessed is something special. Two guys who profoundly differed on one of the most critical problems of our time, but found a way to appreciate each other's guts and conviction. This is what America is intended to look like." The impact of the 12-minute program reached well beyond the television studio and continued to echo across American society for decades. The tape was aired on news shows for weeks, scrutinized by political analysts and social scientists, debated on editorial pages throughout the country, and later studied in journalism schools as an example of how honest discourse might transcend even the darkest differences. The event became a cultural landmark mentioned in books on leadership, dispute resolution, and the power of grace under duress. Ali and Patterson continued an extended communication for the remainder of Ali's life, their odd relationship becoming a symbol of how Americans might differ on basic matters while still appreciating each other's character and convictions. They appeared together at various conferences over the years, presenting their experience as an example of how honest communication might turn foes into friends. Patterson became one of Ali's most outspoken champions in military circles, not because he altered his view about the importance of military duty, but because he learned to see courage in forms he hadn't previously acknowledged. He routinely spoke to the veterans group on how that night had taught him that there are many ways to serve his nation, and that sometimes the most difficult duty includes standing alone against popular opinion for what he feels is right. Years later, when Ali was diagnosed with Parkinson's illness, Patterson was among the first to see him. The military hero he had previously labeled a coward became one of his most loyal champions, helping to develop programs for veterans and working with Ali on several philanthropic causes. The night that was intended to be Ali's humiliation became instead his greatest victory, not against an adversary, but over the anger and misunderstanding that had split America. By reacting to assault with respect, to censure with compassion, Ali taught that genuine strength rests not in winning battles, but in having the fortitude to recognize the humanity in those who confront us most strongly. This 12-minute segment on Tight Show became proof that even in America's most divided moments, understanding was possible when people had the courage to listen to each other's stories, the wisdom to question their own assumptions, and the grace to change their minds in the face of an unexpected truth. Because ultimately, the greatest win isn't crushing your opponent, it's converting them into a friend.